Hello and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Dr. Donald Pelto, and today I have with me my partner at Central Mass Podiatry, Dr. Neil Feldman. And Neil and I are going to talk about a few things, but before I'm going to give his bio. It's very humbling. It's humbling for me to read this. So Neil has done 7 Ironman triathlons, including 2 in Kona, 12 Boston marathons, his personal best in 2003, a 2:58, 6 other marathons with the personal best ever in 2003 of a 2:51 at Bay State. 7 100 runs, 100-mile runs, a 100K run, 2 50-milers, 1 50-kilometer, and then 2 43-milers. And then I believe 2017 you had a 365-day streak of running as well. So we're going to talk to Dr. Feldman about diet, about running, and about a lot of other topics. So thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Don.
You're welcome. So we're going to start, I know everyone's really curious about the running component, but we want to talk about how do you feed yourself to do these runs and kind of about health, and you're really passionate about that. So tell me a little bit about what is a healthy diet?
Well, isn't that the million-dollar question, right? I think my belief a healthy diet is a plant-based diet, first and foremost. And I think that you're either going to supplement with animal proteins or you're not. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to supplement with animal proteins, meaning you're not a vegan or a vegetarian, then I think you should be more on the low-carb, higher-fat side.
Okay.
I think if you're going to be a vegan, which is perfectly acceptable and fine. In fact, I think Einstein said it many years ago, at some point we're all going to be vegans because there's not going to be enough space in the world for everybody, animals and humans. But I think if you're going to be a vegan, then you have to really be low fat because you're going to be higher carb, because the protein sources that you're going to get are going to be coupled with carbohydrates. So beans and legumes and other sources of protein do have higher carbohydrates. So if you do the higher carbohydrate and the higher fat, then that's the Western diet, and that's why we all are struggling with weight and a lot of other disease and illness that comes with poor nutrition.
Yeah. Now, when you say, and when people hear about the low carb, high fat, everyone thinks, isn't high fat bad for you? Our parents taught us to cut the fat off our meat. Everything was low fat when we were growing up. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So a lot of that just comes from industry, and it comes from companies that have a staked interest. Pardon the pun. have an interest in selling product, whether it's dairy, drink milk at every meal is the American Dairy Association. And then I forget when it was. I've confused a lot of the reading that I've done over the years, but I believe it was in the 40s and 50s, and actually in Minnesota, one of the doctors there assumed that the fat you ate was what made you fat. And he did studies, Dr. Keyes was the doctor's name, and he did studies to look for the relationship between eating more fat and getting fat, and he could never find the link. And some of his studies were just buried because he couldn't publish them, because what he found was not what he believed. And it's not. So the idea behind eating fat is our bodies, so fat is a much more efficient energy source than carbohydrates and proteins, because for every gram of fat your body metabolizes, it yields 9 calories of energy, and calories are our energy system. Carbohydrates and protein, it's 4 calories per gram, so fat is actually more than twice as efficient as carbohydrate or protein. If you go way back into prehistoric man before westernized diets, when carbohydrates really weren't a primary source of energy, our bodies, when we go into starvation mode and we're running out of calories, we start craving carbohydrates, because carbohydrate is a quick source of energy. And if our bodies are given carbohydrate, our bodies are going to utilize carbohydrates first ahead of protein and fat. Proteins are the last thing that are going to be metabolized, because that's coming from our muscles. And in starvation modes, it's muscle that gets broken down last. But if you're eating a high carbohydrate diet, then you're constantly going to be consuming the calories from carbohydrates, and any excess carbohydrate and any excess fat that your body consumes is going to be stored as fat. So that's the really important piece of the equation is it's not the fat that you eat that makes you quote unquote fat or leads to fat storage, it's the carbohydrates.
Right.
So if you lower the carbohydrate intake, then your body's going to need energy and it's going to start utilizing the fat stores that we have. And what was always amazing to me is you look at these ultra runners that weigh 130 pounds soaking wet. They look like they're skin and bones, and they have vast fat stores to take their energy from to run 100-mile runs in 11 hours or 12 hours, and these ridiculous amounts. And there's plenty of low-carb, high-fat runners out there. And on the flip side, there's also many unbelievably gifted vegan runners and vegan bodybuilders. I think that the big thing and the big realization, so for me, is I explored this low-carb, high-fat living. And then I thought to myself, well, why? Okay, I believe that. I believe all of this, and I've lived it, and I was very happy, and I felt healthy. I felt good.
It tastes good.
Tastes good. Bacon's good. And then I kind of looked at the other side and said, well, if these guys are so right, well, what about the vegans?
And you tried that for a
period. Yeah. What about the vegan doctors and vegan athletes? You know, are they wrong? It's almost like a religious back and forth, right? If this group is right, does that make the other group wrong? So I kind of took it one step further. So I researched it and then I lived it. So I did an entire trial where I was low carb, high fat. I did blood testing to test inflammatory markers, cholesterol, and then I did metabolic testing where I went on a treadmill and I was breathing into a computer and it measured my what's called respiratory exchange ratio. So it actually could track how much energy you're getting from carbohydrate and how much energy you're getting from fat. And then I ran the Boston Marathon. This is 2 years ago. No, it was last year, actually, 2018. Boston Marathon as a low-carb, high-fat guy.
Okay.
So then April 30th hit. That was the end of that one. May 1st, I became a vegan.
Okay.
Straight 100% full-out vegan.
You're really disciplined. You can.
Very disciplined. So, and I was also sugar-free, no processed foods when I was doing that. So I was low carb, high fat, but also not really consuming any junk. I don't even think I ate cake, and I love cake. And then when I became the vegan, it's a little harder to not do processed foods because then I could do some of the breads, and I was doing spelt breads and the Ezekiel breads, and I was doing a higher grain diet because I was now eating whole grain, and I was doing avocado toast. So there were certain things that were processed, but it was still no sugar. You could eat Oreo cookies as a vegan. I don't think that's a healthy way to be.
But you could.
So yeah, so you could do that and still be a vegan, but there's what I would consider healthy vegan. So I was a healthy vegan for 2 months. I didn't really do the soys. Those soy is very good for a protein source, but I feel like for me, I didn't want to go down the soy route for a couple months. So then I did it all over again. I did the metabolic testing. I did the blood tests, and amazingly, so low carb, high fat, my cholesterol has always been a little bit elevated, a little over 200, but my ratios were always good because I always had very good HDLs. When I became a vegan, 3 weeks into being a vegan, my cholesterol went down to 180, and that was the only finding that was a little off on the low carb, high fat, and that ended up being perfect. And there was no cheese, and for me, cheese was a food group unto itself.
I love cheese.
I mean, if it wasn't a meal if it didn't have cheese in it, And then, so giving that up was, mentally that was the hardest part for me. I wasn't even meat. So at the end of the experiment, I felt really good as a vegan, and ironically enough, I wouldn't suggest people become vegans to lose weight, but I lost about 6 or 7 pounds. And I was eating a lot, and I was eating higher carb, low fat, and I lost a lot of weight to the point where some of my friends were looking at me going, "Are you healthy?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "I feel amazing," and I felt really good both ways.
Yeah.
My issue was, and why I didn't stick with being a vegan, was first, it's really hard if one family member is one thing that's so strict, and the rest of your, especially with kids and a wife, it becomes very challenging to do that. Plus, I felt good. As a non-vegan, but my metabolic testing was not good.
Okay.
So as far as athletic performance is concerned, I would have had to have spent a lot more time as a vegan, and I would have had to have fine-tuned the eating.
So your performance went down a little bit?
It would have been fine for ultra running, but for marathon running and faster paced running, it was not fine.
Okay.
And we can talk about that
Yeah.
too if you'd like.
Yeah.
So I ended up not being a vegan. My diet has far less cheese in it. I rarely eat red meat. If I crave a burger, I'll have a burger. If I crave a steak, I'll have a steak.
Mhm.
But if there's more than 2 or 3 times in the year, in the last year that I've had that, that's about right.
Okay. Okay.
So to me, that's a healthy balance.
Yeah.
And I think
yeah.
Michael Pollan is a really good food writer, and he's got some good documentaries on Netflix. And his thing is eat food, mostly plants, not as much. And I think that's a really good sort of baseline that we all should strive for. The hard part is if you're trying to make a fundamental change. If you have 20 pounds to lose or 30 pounds or more to lose, and you really have to make a change, then I think sometimes it's an all-in or not-in type of change. Because I don't think you can, especially if you're somebody that's a little carbohydrate addicted, it's really hard to have a little bread because it just opens up the floodgates, and it's hard to control yourself. So.
Yeah. And let's segue now into talking a little bit about weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's repeat that quote from Michael Pollan
Yeah.
and kind of say, well, how do you apply that in your life?
Right. So eat food, mostly plants, not as much. So it's not the calories that matter for weight gain or weight loss. They do matter, of course they matter, but not all calories are equal to the body.
Mm-hmm.
So food is essentially a fuel source for the body. And you're a unique individual, I'm a unique individual, everybody in the audience is a unique individual. So we're all going to respond uniquely to the calories we take in. And I think it's really important to identify what our individual needs are going to be, because they might be a little different. But weight gain and weight loss is actually the hormonal response to the calories that you do consume. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily if I consume 300 calories, then if I burn 300 calories, I'm going to have I'm going to have no weight gain or weight loss. It doesn't work like that. You could consume 100 carbohydrate calories and gain weight, even though you're at a net loss for the day. And when in the 1920s and 1930s, during the Depression era, there were children that were starving that literally looked obese because whatever calories they had were from bread and carbohydrates, very simple carbohydrates. Fiber and complex carbohydrates from salad and vegetables. I mean, those are excellent sources. Mm-hmm. And we need carbohydrates to survive. Mm-hmm. But the body, a 70 kilogram or 150 pound body probably only needs about 120 grams of carbohydrate per day.
And what is that equivalent to, like a salad? Or
so an apple is probably 20 to 25 grams of mm-hmm. carbohydrate. And I'm not somebody to weigh things out.
To weigh things or track things.
Yeah, but you could track things, and the internet has a number of sources. You could say, you could just Google how many carbohydrates are in, a 4-ounce piece of chicken or meat, mm-hmm.
and they do it for you. You put in how big it was.
Exactly. So if you really want to get that in depth, then fine. But I think if you stick with sort of a lower carb, higher fat diet, there's certain things that are going to be eliminated. You're not going to be eating bread or pasta or rice. And if you avoid those, then you really don't have to worry about counting
how much
carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could mm-hmm. pretty much eat to satisfaction, and you just got to know yourself. Mm-hmm. And you get to know if you overeat, then take less food, or some of the tricks are get a smaller plate. Because mm-hmm. if people are used to filling up their plate, and you have a big plate, well, you're going to fill up the big plate.
You're going to fill it.
If you get a smaller plate, then fill a smaller plate. Eat the salad first and load up on the salad so mm-hmm. that there's not as much room for everything
the other
else.
Thing. Yeah.
But there's a lot to it, and then there's the whole emotional and
eating.
Psychological component to it. It becomes very challenging.
Comfort foods and things like that. If you're training for a marathon or a 100-mile run, can you just eat whatever you want?
I can, but it depends on performance. If I'm trying to really perform to my best, mm-hmm. then I'm going to stick with mostly low. So
there's different phases
in the
training
different
period,
phases,
right?
So when you're training intensely and I'm running long and I'm running hard, I'm going to be burning a lot more carbohydrate and a lot more calories, mm-hmm. and I need to eat a lot. And
I've seen you eat a lot.
Yeah, I can eat a lot. So if I'm going to run hard for 2 hours, let's say, or 3 hours, or bike hard for 6 hours or 7 hours back in the old days when I used to do triathlons, I'd have a window afterwards. Because when you're exercising, there's a hormone called insulin. So when you eat carbohydrates, your pancreas releases insulin into the bloodstream because carbohydrates are not supposed to be circulating through the bloodstream. They're supposed to be used as energy and stored as what's called glycogen in the liver, muscle, and your brain can only utilize carbohydrate for energy as well. So excess carbohydrate needs to be stored because it can't be circulating around your bloodstream, and it's insulin that does that job. If there's excess carbohydrate and all the stores are full, then it's got to go somewhere, and the body converts it into fat, and that's why insulin is such a key hormone when it comes to weight gain and weight loss. And stabilizing insulin levels so there's not too much insulin floating around is really, really important. It's probably the single most important thing. And there's other factors like stress and cortisol that affect insulin levels
sleep,
as well.
Sleep
is a huge one because with cortisol levels. After exercise, especially after intense exercise,
for long hours,
that whole insulin response does not really happen in the same way. So you do have this little window.
Cheat window?
It's a cheat window, yeah. So I had learned from coaches in years past that it mirrors the length of time you spend in intense exercise. So if you exercise intensely for 2 hours, well, you have a 2-hour, what I would call a grain window. If I wanted a piece of pizza or a bagel or a slice of bread, or pasta, that was my window to do that. But if you're losing weight, that's a great time to not do that, because now your body's going to then tap into its fat stores to get the energy that's needed. So if you're trying to not lose weight, then you have to eat some of the excess carbohydrates. If you're trying to lose weight, then really minimize that. And a lot of people, they'll go to do a spinning class or a jazzercise or you name it. They'll do a class, and it's a 40-minute class of intense exercise, and then they'll go get a juice or a Starbucks afterwards and just entirely destroy the thing, because it might be within the window, but the type of carbohydrate they're getting is not only in excess of what they've just burned, but it's also they're going to be taking it in even later than the window because they got to drive to the place. Or even if they have it there, it's not going to help you lose weight. It's probably going to lead to fat gain. Plus, if you do too much intense exercise, and this is the key with running, is you don't exercise intensely all the time. If you do too much intense exercise, your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormones, are going to be elevated, and they're going to also increase your insulin response at other times during the day. So whereas you might have a small period where you can lose a few pounds, your body's going to be in fat storage and not fat burning mode for much of the rest of it.
In terms of weight loss, is it better to work out? Is it better to eat differently or eat less? Is it better to do both? Do you need to work out necessarily?
I think we're doctors, right? So people come into us hurting, and how'd you get hurt? Well, I'm trying to lose a couple pounds, and I'm exercising more, and then my foot hurts, and now I can't exercise. Now I'm gaining weight. What do I do?
And I want to work out. Can I go to the gym? When can I go to the gym?
Right. So exercise is really good, and exercise is important. You should do exercise, but this isn't the biggest loser. That's not real life. Life is just you exercise, you move. Just get your body moving. Moving, even standing, is going to burn calories more than sitting is. I try to not sit if I can. I have a stand-up desk. Try to move around as much as possible, but try to stand more, walk more, just move more. But diet has to be that fundamental change, because you're not gonna ever lose weight if you don't change that basic point.
Is it a diet? Okay, I'm going to do a 3-month diet, and then I can go back to how I eat, or is it
It's a lifestyle.
Okay, so it's a lifestyle. It's not a diet.
Right. Again, the fuel in the tank matters. We're high performance vehicles.
Machines,
I always use car analogies, right? You're a Porsche, you're a Ferrari, you're a Lamborghini. You're not going to put the lawnmower fuel in the tank. It's going to work, but it's not going to work very well. And you have to find the right fuel for your tank that's going to power your body efficiently and the way it's supposed to be. We have one one life here. We have one body. It's got to last us a lifetime. Take care of it. Don't load it up with crap. Move it. It's meant to be moved.
Yeah.
And when you sit for a long period of time, it's hard to get started again. As you get older, the longer you sit or become, I don't want to call it disabled, but if you have an injury and you rest, that's not going to help you get better. Again, using the car analogy, if your tire is flat, putting it in the garage for 3 months isn't going to fix the tire.
That's a good analogy.
And it's and why did the tire get flat? Sorry, we're talking about weight. Why did the tire get flat? The tire got flat because of alignment issues, which is posture. So posture is everything. What's the key to good posture? Core engagement. What's the key to good core? Breathing. Breathing ties in with insulin and cortisol and sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, which kind of runs the intestines, and it's all tied together. You can't separate the pieces and expect to get these miraculous results. It's sort of, again, an all-in or not-in way of being. Now, it's hard because not everybody's as motivated. Some people are really motivated and they say, I'll do anything. Okay, we'll give up the bread. Well, I can't do that. Italian. I eat bread and pasta at every meal. Okay. So, then don't give that up, but give up something. It's like something's got to change. If you have gotten to 40 or 50 or 60 and you are the way that you are, there's a reason that you are the way that you are. And if you want it to be different, then you have to do different. And whatever that is, and I don't care. I don't have skin in your game. I can make recommendations, and I know how I live my life. But I can't expect somebody else to.
You can't make people change. To
have the motivation that I have about something that's meaningful to me that's not meaningful to somebody else. But I'm all in with helping, and I'll do.
If you're willing,
passionate, and I'll do anything I can to help somebody, achieve what they want to achieve. But they at some point look in the mirror and say, how bad do I really want this? And what changes am I willing to take? If you don't have to lose weight to be healthy and happy. Because again, some people are just going to not lose weight. Some people can eat whatever they want and they're never going to gain a pound. And some people
that doesn't mean they're healthy.
Yeah. And some people just look at food and gain weight. And it really happens because of insulin and dopamine and other hormones that we have. Phil Maffetone is a health and wellness guru. He wrote a book called The Overfat Pandemic. And he calls it overfat because thin people can be very unhealthy. They just don't have a lot of weight, but they have the same metabolic processes that people that are stereotypically overweight get. They're just not healthy. And he calls it overfat. And I think that's a good way to put it. And again, it's the Western diet. It's that high carb, high fat diet. Quick, convenient meals, bars. Are bars healthy? No, not if they're processed. There's probably healthier bars than others if you need energy, but if you eat the right way, you're not going to have the energy ups and downs. Like, when I'm eating well, and I'm not always eating well, like right now I'm on a food vacation. I've had a busy year, and I'm giving myself a couple months where I'm just not really worried about it. Put on a few pounds, and I'm happy with that because I know at some point I'm going to become disciplined and intense again. And I'm fortunate that I'm not going to gain a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Whereas a good friend of mine that I run with all the time, we can eat the exact same things, and he's going to be 10 pounds heavier next week than I am.
Wow.
And we can eat the exact same thing. It's just our bodies are different. But it's important to know kind of yourself.
Let's transition now to people that are maybe training for a marathon, Ironman, a triathlon, 100-mile or something like that. We talked a little bit about I'd like to talk about how do you stay healthy when you're running? How do you not get injured? What are some tips for people? Because injury is something that we treat, but how do people avoid seeing us?
Don't do what I do.
Okay.
Don't do what I've done.
Explain what you've done, what you've learned.
So I've, obviously we treat all this stuff, but I've also injured myself in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, we could talk a little bit about your pelvis there.
Yep. So in 2009, I broke my pelvis in 2 places because of improper training. Going all out all the time, not taking the proper recovery. Broke my heel in 2014 trying to better my previous personal bests, and again, not listening to the signs. So, knock on wood, I've not been injured in 5 years significantly, because I've definitely done a lot more listening to my body, not pushing myself as hard, taking more recovery. When you get injured, like say like a stress fracture, let's say, or something.
That's pretty common. Yep.
Yeah, it's very common. It's never one thing. It's usually the combination of 5, 6, 7 things that come together, and we all want to pin it on, oh, I shouldn't have done that, when I did it, or I shouldn't have got that pair of shoes, because right when I bought that pair of shoes, then it all went bad. It's never that. It's the accumulation of events. Lack of sleep, increased stress, poor nutrition, poor running habits.
Tight muscles somewhere.
Yeah, just is not doing all the little things, and then not paying attention to the warning signs when they happen. So for me, the best thing was to slow everything down and to realize, as I'm getting into my late 40s, almost 50, is I have a lot of miles under my belt. So I don't need to push myself quite as hard. I need to pick my spots. If I want to run really fast, I have to train in a way where right now my base is like I could do 100 miles right now if I wanted to, not fast and not to my best, but I could do it. I could get it done because I have a lot of miles in my body, and I know I could safely do it. It's probably not the healthiest thing to do, but it can be done. So do I have to really train really, really hard? I think I train a lot less, and I train smarter. I try to become more efficient, not necessarily work harder. It's working smarter. Yeah, exactly. And picking and choosing your spots. So I try not to do more than one key intense workout a week. And if I'm not feeling it that week, I'll skip it. I have no problem taking a day off at this point. I did do that run streak a couple of years ago, which was awesome. And I actually, that whole year, I felt great.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel any tweaks until the day after I took my first day off. And I forced myself to take January 1st off because I didn't want it to get into my head. Because the streaks are very addictive. And I was like, I know I have an addictive personality, and I didn't want any part of it. But I wanted to do it just to see what it was like. But I think running often, if you want to be a runner, is really important. I think the consistency of movement is really important. I think when we run once a week or once on the weekend, it becomes really hard because you run and then you might get a little sore muscles, and then you stagnate, and then you do it again, and you never really get your body used to running. So one of the keys that I have my patients doing is running often, but not enough to where they're going to need recovery. So 10 minutes, 15 minutes, almost every day, as opposed to even walk-run programs, which can work, absolutely. And it depends on the type of injury they're coming back from, or if they're just trying to get in shape, those couch to 5K programs. I think if you want to run a race and you want to be a runner, you got to run. You got to get your body used to that. So it doesn't have to be like 3 miles or 10 miles or even 30 minutes or an hour. Just 10 minutes is fine. It's enough. Just getting the body used to running. Do that for a month, and then a couple days a week, then you can run a little longer, maybe a 15 or 20-minute run. And then throw in a 5K every now and then. It's fine. It's fun.
Yeah.
Instead
of that, because there's certain people that do 3 miles every single day, or 3 days a week, or 5 days a week.
Right. Or they run races every single week. Or they run the same pace.
So you're varying
variability. Your bodies need variability. Variability to terrain. So if you're only on a treadmill, that's not necessarily the best thing because it's just so confined, and you have a motor that's running, you just got to keep up. So if your form's a little off, it's going to be very off.
So outdoors better? Or?
I like outdoors, and if you can't do outdoors because of darkness and safety and security, then mix it up. Don't just do a treadmill every day. I'm not a huge elliptical fan, but it is good aerobic activity. So if you're going to do an elliptical, I recommend people hop on the bike for about a minute afterwards just to spin out the legs and get the hips moving again. Because when you're on an elliptical, you're pushing down with one side and the other side comes up. Whereas in real life, you have to lift your legs off the ground to move. So it's important to just keep the body moving with whatever it takes and have variability. And yes, outdoors is definitely better.
And for people that are trying to do these longer trainings, marathon or up, you've mentioned to me, it's kind of like a part-time job sometimes. And how do you keep balance with your job, with your spouse, with everything else in life? How do you keep that balance? What are some tips for people?
It's hard, I think that's probably one of the main reasons I don't do triathlon anymore, because for me, I keep mentioning the all in or not in. It's the type of personality I am, and I want to do the best I can with whatever I do, and triathlon is just so intensive that some of those weeks are 20 hours. Now my biggest run weeks might be 11 hours. With one run that's 7 or 8 hours.
So in 1 week you run 11 hours.
Yeah,
okay.
total of the week.
Whole
That's a pretty good running week. So it's hard. With you have to identify sort of what you can do, what work and life allow you to do, but then you have to respond to who you are. I know who I am. I know I need to sign up for an event and do an event to make me. Because if I don't do that, my wife will just look at me and she's, maybe you should go for a run right now. And I'm thinking, thank you, hon, because you're right. I really need to go for that run because just mentally it's all bottled up, and that's my release. But I'm not good at just running to run. Mm-hmm. I need an event.
And that's what I think you mentioned one time. You'd finished one event and someone asked, "Oh, are you done now?"
Yeah.
And you're like, no.
Yeah, well, my first Ironman that I did, I was done and I crossed the line. And actually, ironically enough, my heel hurt. I went to the med tent for, actually, no, I didn't go to the med tent for that, but I got dehydrated and needed an IV. But I crossed the line saying, I am never doing that again, ever. Done. One and done. Then the next day, I was like, wow, that was really cool. Like, man. Huh. Then later that afternoon, I'm like, if I could do another one. Then the next day, I was like, where's a race I need to sign up? And then I didn't have a race to sign up for. And then I was like in this depression because I had worked so hard for like 9 months, 10 months. And I was like, well, what do I do now? And then, so I realized that I kind of always have to have something out there.
A race.
A race, or it doesn't have to be a race, because when I was injured, and I couldn't run, actually I did mountain bike.
Okay.
I did bike it, but I also, I read a lot. I learned to play the cello. I kind of checked off the honey-do list that had about an 8-year backlog of things that I needed to get done around the house that just didn't get done. So with the race, I can then set up a
training plan, right?
A training plan that's periodized, where I have like a base, where you're just developing a base level of fitness, and then you get a little more intense, and then it builds to a maximum time, and then it kind of tapers down to the event. And in that, I try to work around family schedules as best I can, especially as the kids are getting a little older. And I just do the best I can to, work around kids' sports or school schedules and what my wife needs to do. And, my wife's been very gracious to me over the years with time, but there are nights when I'll go out at 10 o'clock at night. I'll wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
I'll do things early, or I'll do things late. Some nights I can't sleep. I'll fall asleep and I'll wake up at 2 in the morning. I have my running clothes ready to go. And I have plenty of runs where I've done at 2:30 in the morning for a 2-hour run. And it's crazy, but I know I'm not falling back asleep until about a half an hour before the alarm goes off. And I know if I get it done there, it saves a lot of time for the rest of the day. And being a guy, it's a little easier. I'm not worried about getting attacked, but then again, there's not many people out there at 2:30 in the morning. In the back road, back country roads, I'll run right in the middle of the road, and I won't see anybody. And there's a certain peacefulness to that. There's been nights I'll go up to Wachusett and I'll snowshoe in the winter, like 4 in the morning, and it's me and the stars or the snowmaking machines and the snow cats, and I'll avoid them. But it's really, some of my best runs ever are just in the middle of the night, alone, your breath, stars, and there's a peacefulness to that. It's really enjoyable. But it's very hard finding the balance. There's actually 2 books I always recommend to people, like especially with triathlons and Ironman. One is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, which I think is a wonderful book. And I think I also recommend reading it every decade of your life, because lives change so dramatically. We change, right? We don't think we change because we're the same person and looking in the mirror. but everything changes, and the way you see life is different. I'll be 50 next year, so I get to listen to it again on Audible.
That's great.
But it's, our perception of the world changes so dramatically because we learn through experience. And, what you know now versus what you knew at 20 about the world. You think you know everything when you're 20. And then at 50, you realize you knew nothing at 20 except, what you thought you knew. And then knowing that now, it's funny, now I realize the more sure I am about something in life, the more sure I'm wrong about it. Because I think the more we know about something, the more we realize we just don't know enough about something. So when people are so opinionated about one thing, whether it's being a vegan or being keto or this or that, I just feel like they don't have enough experience in the other realms, because it doesn't make them right. It just makes them opinionated. Yeah. And it's good. If it works for them, it's great, but it doesn't mean everybody has to follow that suit.
Everyone's different.
Everyone's different, and not everybody has to run 100 miles or run a marathon or eat the way that I do or live the way that I do. In fact, most people probably hate the way that I live because maybe a little too disciplined at times, but it works for me. I enjoy it, and but that balance is hard. So the other book is The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, which is in the Christian book section. And I've just found that a really helpful book, because when you're doing a race or when you're eating a certain way and when you're into it, it's you. It's a very selfish thing. And a lot of times with triathlons or marathons, it's all about me, or it's all about the person doing it. Yeah. And you think, look, when I was doing triathlons and Ironman, I was like, all right, hon, I got a 6-hour bike ride. What are we doing today? I'll get up at 3 and I'll be back at this point. And she's like, are you nuts? Like 6 hours? Who does that stuff? And I didn't realize, I thought I was doing everything for the family, but
you were
what I was
preloading
doing,
the workouts.
Yeah, it still affects, because I'm still getting up in the middle of the night. I'm still leaving the house. I'm still like not there when the kids get up. It's it's doing things that are good for me, but it might not necessarily be good for the family. So unfortunately, I've kind of learned the hard way. And again, we have a very good relationship, and she's been very supportive, and I've learned a lot. And I try to not overdo things, and I try to make sure that I'm not the only one having their needs fulfilled. Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing with that work-life family balance, because you're never going to have full balance if you have to do it all, because you'd want to be with your kids all the time. And if you're with your kids all the time, you want to be at work, and if you're at work, you can't do it all. Yeah. So balance is always fluctuating, because your kids change in their ages, and their needs change. So, from throughout the year, it's always changing. So you have to figure out what's needed at this time versus that time. Yeah, yeah. And this year I'm not doing Boston. I qualified, but I missed it by 18 seconds. And although I'm sad, I'm actually a little bit happy, because I hate training for that race in the middle of winter. It's the worst. Cold runs, and that's when I've gotten the most hurt. Yeah. Is trying to push myself through February and like getting all of those snowy, cold, miserable runs out of the way. Yeah. And then I'm hurt right when the nice weather starts to come.
That's what I wanted to segue into. What are some of the common mistakes that people make that bring them into the office to see you? Because you like to see runners. If you could see one thing all day long, and you have enough time, it would be the runners.
Be runners, or it would also be the mom or dad that's just that wants to get in better shape and maybe lose a few pounds, and just how do we get started? Like that's
and they don't come in because of that, though. They become hurt.
But that's what I'm most passionate about. That and helping runners achieve their goals. Or it's not even runners. It's like anything. It's like, why are you in? Why are you here? What's your goal?
What do you want to do?
What's your motivation? Like, what is it that you want? And if I can help them reach that, that's great. And sometimes it is, weight, and sometimes it is running a race. I think too many beginning runners, all of a sudden they get the running bug at, say, 40 or 50. They don't have a lot of miles under their belt, and now they're running 10, 15 races a year, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, And every run that they do is exactly the same. Let's say it's a 9-minute pace. Every run's a 9-minute pace. Their marathon's a 9-minute pace. Or they'll do their training runs at faster times than they can run a marathon.
Okay.
Which it should be the other way around. You should train slower to run faster because you have to develop an aerobic base of fitness, and this is more into that metabolic training. If you really want to become a bulletproof runner that doesn't get hurt, don't run hard. Run often, but don't run hard.
Right? Yeah.
It's not just Maffetone, it's just common sense. Like if you're, okay, we'll go back to the car analogy.
So when we talk about,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Let's go to the car analogy, right? So if you're like a little Ford Focus, right? And let's say you have 4 spare tires on the car. Are you going to drive at 80? No.
Not with one.
It's going to fall apart, right? So if you're a new runner and your body isn't designed to be running 2-hour marathons or 3-hour marathons, and then you start running hard, and again, pace is relative. Pace doesn't matter whether you're an 11-minute runner, a 12-minute per mile runner, if you're slow or you're fast. Like slow and fast are just relative terms. There's always people faster and there's always people slower. So if you're on the slower side of things, it doesn't matter. It's what matters about your body, what its capacity is. And if you're running at a capacity, or if you're running harder than what your capacity is, you're going to get hurt. And it's just a matter of time. But if you know what your limitations are and you stay under those limitations, so that Ford Focus with the 4 spare tires, if it goes at 30 miles an hour, you're going to ride that car a long, long way. And it's going to stay perfectly fine. So you have to stay within yourself. And if you can develop that aerobic base of fitness, and that's a Maffetone thing, if you can function at the lowest end of your aerobic capacity, you're going to get the same benefit that if you function at the high end of that aerobic capacity. So why push yourself so hard? And just, so when you're running with other people, that's another, because running is social, and it should be social, it should be fun, but if all of your runs are with other people that are all at different paces, and if they're running faster or slower, you're not really going to develop your aerobic base of fitness. So if your goal is a marathon and your goal is to run a Boston qualifier for a marathon, it might not be best to be running every run with with a group of people. So you gotta keep that in mind.
And there's some kind of some tests they can do this. You talk about metabolic.
Yeah. So metabolic efficiency. So what's important is
so you can find out where you're at the lower level of.
Yeah. So we're always burning carbohydrates and we're always burning fat, right? Optimally, we're going to be burning more fat than carbohydrates. So when we're just walking and we can talk and we breathe and we can sing a song, and or if you're just moving very slowly, you're mostly burning fat. Now, as you start to run really fast, or you start working harder, and then you start getting a little bit short of breath, and then maybe you can't do things. Now you're burning more carbohydrate. And carbohydrate is when you're metabolizing carbohydrate, it's called anaerobic metabolism, and your body is. And the byproduct of that metabolism is carbon dioxide. And you have to breathe that out. So you're going to increase your respiratory rate to breathe out more carbon dioxide. Now, when you're not working very hard, or your body isn't working very hard, you're going to be metabolizing fat for energy, and the byproduct of fat metabolism is oxygen. So you can just breathe at a lower respiratory rate. There's nothing that's excited. So from a running standpoint, if you can be burning more fat than carbohydrate, you're going to be able to go a lot longer.
Without getting winded.
Right. And when I was doing my vegan trial, my metabolic efficiency point, so if you look at a chart, a graph, so if this is, so you have one line that's carbohydrate metabolism and another line that's fat metabolism, they're going to cross over, because as you increase your effort, carbohydrate metabolism goes up, fat metabolism goes down, because at the end you've got a 1-to-1, like you're metabolizing, so you're getting part from fat and part from carbohydrate, right? So there's a ratio of each that you're getting from. So the harder you work, the more carbohydrate you're utilizing, the less fat you're utilizing. The less hard you're working, the more fat you're utilizing, the less carbohydrate. And once you are using more carbohydrate than fat, then what's going to happen is your body's going to need to replenish that carbohydrate to sustain the energy. But when you're working really hard, your intestines aren't primed to consume that for use right away. The gels and goos are fine, but there's a limit. It's probably about 2.5, 3.5 hours or so of hard, intense exercise. But you have to develop that. For some people, it's like 10 minutes or 20 minutes. You have to develop that. But if you stay in that mostly fat burning zone, you can go forever. So if you can develop your metabolic efficiency to be burning more fat than carbohydrate, then you're going to be good. So when I was the low carb, high fat guy, my metabolic efficiency point was 171 beats per minute. So my heart rate was.
So you put a strap on.
Yeah. So you're on a treadmill, pinching off your nose, breathing into a mask with a telemetry strap for heart rate, and the computer measures your respiratory exchange ratio, and then you can find out the exact moment your heart rate's at when you're burning more carbohydrate than fat. So that point when I was low carb, high fat was 171 beats per minute. When I was running Boston that year, I averaged 168 beats per minute. So I was in that good zone. So my fueling requirements were not that high. Now, when I became the vegan, it was 135, which if I'm doing ultras, it's fine because my heart rate for ultras is pretty much going to be that 130, 135 anyway. So I'm still sort of below that. But if I wanted to run a fast marathon, I wouldn't have been. I would have burned out really quickly. Now, again, if I lived as a vegan for years, that would fix itself. It's just I was a 2-month trial there. So, so for shorter duration training, I think the optimal way is sort of lower carb, higher fat because it's going to force the fat burning. It's going to force that efficiency. But if you're eating a high carb diet and you're running too intensely, you're never going to develop that aerobic base of fitness. So it's sort of that I run to eat and eat to run differently because I'm all about metabolic efficiency because I want my body to be as efficient as possible.
And less strain.
Less strained.
So
So I run
the smartest way.
Yeah, I run slow. So I'll go out and run 10-minute miles.
Do you go based on heart rate when you run? You look at your heart rate? Is that what you do?
When I'm training, yes.
Okay.
Now I just
run.
I just run.
10-minute miles.
Yeah, I've run for I'm on a 17-year run here in terms of intense activity. For 17 years, I've done enough testing. I've worn enough telemetry straps and heart rate that I'm pretty good with where I'm at.
Okay.
And I like to listen to audiobooks. I like to sing when I run.
So you're enjoying it.
I enjoy it. Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
If I can sing a song while I'm running, then I know I'm at a pretty low heart rate.
That's great.
And every now and then, it's good to just open it up and run fast, here and there.
And, I like that in the races too.
In a race, yeah.
So you brought some show and tell here. I think these are things that no one's probably ever seen. So show us what we have here to look at.
So this was my year this year.
Okay. You have to hold them up for everyone to see.
Yeah. So
which one do you want to show first?
So for running these ultra runs, the nugget is a belt buckle.
No, why a belt buckle?
I don't know. Long ago. So I think it takes its place. So the first ever 100-mile run was the Western States 100-mile run. And that's the one. That's why I do all this nonsense. I really want to run that race. It's just so hard to get into. It's lottery only. Thousands of people enter every year for 270 spots. So I'll be entering for the 5th straight year. I keep doubling my chances. So last year my chances were really slim to none. This year they go more from slim to a little less slim. And each successive year I do a qualifying race and enter, I increase my odds. So one of these years, hopefully I'll get it.
Okay.
But the first ever 100-mile run was a horse race. And the guy who entered, this guy Ainsley, he entered with his horse, and his horse was lame like 2 or 3 months before the race. And he didn't want to pull out because it's such a prestigious horse event to be in. So he's like, well, I'll just run it. So he ran it, and it became this sort of cult thing. A couple people found out about it. Then the next year, a few other people showed up to run it as well. And then within a few years, it was so busy a running race.
No room for horses.
The horses dropped out. So I think, and that was what you got, it was the buckle. And I think that's where it kind of took on. So the next year, Vermont, which was a horse race as well, heard about this, and they opened it up to runners as well. And I've done the Vermont race twice, and it's still a horse and ultra running race. So you're literally running with horses, and it is the coolest thing to be running along and hear the clip clop, clip clop, clip clop, and you're like, whoa! And each time I've done that race, there's a few horses that you kind of go back and forth with a little bit, and you talk to the owners. And the last time I did it, one of the horses recognized me at mile 65 or something like that. I was just running, and I was in a little zone. I'm like kind of just looking ahead, and I heard the clip clop, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like Bandit or whatever the horse's name. I forget now. It was a few years ago. And literally the horse goes, and the owner was like, oh my God. And it was like, because the horse really, I connected with the horse. It was the coolest thing. Unfortunately, that horse didn't finish that year, and I was really sad. It was about mile 85. I saw one of the other horses it was with, and I found out the horse dropped. But I saw the horse the next day. Everything was good. So I think that's where the buckles come from, the horse races and just like the whole cowboy kind of culture.
Yeah.
So in February, I helped a friend do his first 100-mile race down in Texas.
Okay.
And this was the Rocky Raccoon 100, 4 loops down north of Houston. And that was this one. And then the real race I was gearing up for was the Leadville 100, and this was in August, all over 10,000 feet. So that was a pretty neat race. Second time I've done this. It was the third time I entered, but the last time I stung by bees, and I'm allergic to bees, so I was taken off by an ambulance.
Yep.
Still the only race.
I didn't know you were coming back.
The only race I didn't finish. So this is a really tough race. I did really well, and I was really happy with this one. And then my buddy Jim, God bless you, Jim, he was like, hey, I'm doing a 100-miler. You join me. And I was like, there's no, I only ran about 10 times since the Leadville race in 2 months. And it was the Mid-State Trail.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to do the Mid-State Trail. I was thinking more like 2 or 3 days. So he was doing that. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just do part of it with you. And I wanted to do the first part, because, the hills and with the foliage. So anyway, I ended up doing the whole thing. And so that was this one, the Mid-State Massive 100-miler. And that was neat. It's neat to kind of test your body out and see what you can do. I really was not trained for it. And, and I've had friends that have done the Ghost Train 100-miler, which was the weekend after that, that really, you don't need to train hard if you have a good base of fitness to do 100 miles. I joke they're eating events. And you just got to run from eating station to eating station. And as long as you can keep going, you'll be good. And that's the ultra running is good. It's a really good vibe. Marathon running can be intense. Triathlons now can be really intense, and the trail running vibe is really kind of cool. It's just all cool you're out in the woods. You sometimes go hours without seeing another soul, and I have amazing friends, and we can run for 28 hours together and not get sick of each other. It sounds crazy, but it's the way it is.
Hey. Well, thank you so much for the interview today. It was great.
Yeah.
And, a lot of good content.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I always appreciate talking about that.
Hey, guys. Thank you for watching Healthy Living. You're going to find a few links here I'd like you to click. One is to subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Also, you can learn more. There are some videos here you can see.